We come to the RNA processing. RNA processing is the processing of the primary transcript, especially in the eukaryotic systems. In eukaryotic systems, as you know, we have a primary transcript or the RNA, which is coded from the DNA, which includes introns and exons. Or introns are the intervening sequences which needs to be removed during the processing of the RNA, and the exon units which will be joined together to produce the functional RNA, which will be coded as proteins. So I know you are already aware of these basic concepts about the RNA processing and other things. So right now I will explain some basic concepts about that one. So in case of a primary transcript of a transcription process, here we have the two blue strands of the DNA, which is the double helical DNA that is shown here. And this is the formation of a primary transcript and its processing during maturation of mRNA in a typical eukaryotic cell, that is shown here. Now from the DNA, which is shown here, the polymerase II of the eukaryotic system, which will produce a transcription bubble, and starting from the transcription bubble, the RNA polymerase II will proceed in this direction, unwinding the DNA strands, and the bubble will extend in this particular direction, and the primary transcript or the RNA is coded from that DNA template. And in that primary transcript that is produced, we have some regions like exon regions, intron regions, and there are multiple intron and exon regions will be there in the primary transcript. So these exon units were actually the functional compartment or a functional part of the RNA. So you can see that the primary transcript which is produced from a eukaryotic system, which will contain exons and introns. As I mentioned, introns were the intervening sequences which is present in between the exon units, which needs to be removed during the processing of the RNA, and the functional exon units need to be joined together so that the final mRNA is or final RNA transcript is produced, and that will be subsequently coded to the proteins during the transcription process. And there is also another point that you have to notice, that is a 5' cap is added to all the eukaryotic RNAs during the production, and we will see the details, and it is having its own significance and role. Okay, now from that primary transcript that is produced, there is a completion of the primary transcript. That is, once this transcript is completely produced, you will have a primary transcript of the eukaryotic mRNA or RNA. And there are intron regions and exon regions which is intertwined. Then a 5' cap which is attached at one of the ends, which is also a part of the production of the 5' cap is a part of the post-transcriptional modification which is occurring after the transcription or the during transcription process, which is an essential part of eukaryotic transcription. And at the end there will be some non-coding end sequences, and this finally these non-coding end sequences will be spliced, or during the splicing process of the cleavage and polyadenylation splicing process, the mature RNA is produced, which will be attached with a 5' cap, and exons were joined together by removal of the introns, and finally the non-coding sequences at the end is trimmed, and a tail or polyadenylate tail is added at the 3' end of the mRNA. So in the case of a final mature mRNA that is produced in a eukaryotic system, we will have a 5' cap at the 5' end. Exons were joined together after the removal of the intron units. Then finally, the non-coding sequences at the 3' end is removed and a poly A tail is attached at the end of the 3' at the 3' end of the primary transcript, so that the final mature mRNA is produced. This is the overall process of processing of these eukaryotic mRNA. Now we will come to the details of each and every step. So in today's session, we will be handling with RNA splicing or RNA processing, in which the primary unprocessed RNA, which is produced in a eukaryotic system, is converted to the mature RNA by different post-transcriptional modifications or post-transcriptional processing. So here we have the 5' capping process, which is a major process, an event that is occurring in the post-transcriptional modification. Here you can see this end is the 5' end of the RNA. So this is the last base or nucleotide, that is base and sugar, that is the nucleotide that is present, or 5' end nucleotide of the RNA that is produced. And at the end of the 5' nucleotide, that is the terminal 5' terminal nucleotide, we will have a phosphate group, 5' phosphate group. So this is the 5' phosphate group. And in the 5' cap addition, we will have a 7-methyl guanosine residue. So this is an incoming residue with a 7-methyl guanosine. This is a modified guanosine. So guanosine, which will have the sugar ring or ribose. It's not deoxyribose, it is a ribose, because here we have a OH. So the ribose ring and the concerned base that is attached here, and there is a methyl group attached at 7th position. So this 7-methyl guanosine is the incoming residue which will be attached at the 5' end of the primary transcript. So the first step in the 5' cap addition is the addition of a 7-methyl guanosine residue at the end of the 5' phosphate, or at the 5' terminal phosphate group. So this is the 5' phosphate group and a 7-methyl guanosine which will be attached with a 5' triphosphate linkage. So the normally in every DNA or RNA, the linkage is a phosphate group with an OH group, or a 3' OH with a 5' phosphate. That is the normal connection or the normal bonding in every DNA and RNA. So that's how the DNA strand or RNA strand extends. So the normal bonding is between 5' phosphate and 3' OH. But here we have to notice that the 7-methyl guanosine is not attached to the 5' phosphate group with the OH group at second position or third position, just like any other nucleotide. But it is attached to the 5' phosphate group with the 5' phosphate group of the incoming nucleotide, that is 7-methyl guanosine. So there is a 5' linkage, not a 5' 3' linkage. For 5' 3' linkage is not there. A 5' triphosphate linkage is used for attaching the 7-methyl guanosine residue at the terminal phosphate group of the primary transcript. Now we have to see that there is an addition of a methyl group on the 2' OH of the first base. Sometimes the second base of the 2' of the 2' OH of the second base is also methylated. So the overall process of 5' capping includes addition of a 7-methyl guanosine at the end residue using a 5-5' linkage. And another, in some other cases, that may be addition of additional CH3 groups in 2' positions or to the 2' OH of the first or second or first and second residues of the nucleotides. So these three events is occurring during the 5' cap addition. So 7-methyl guanosine attached at the 5' end of 5' phosphate using a 5' triphosphate linkage, and addition of a CH3 to the second OH of the ribose residue of the first base, and another one on the second base. So this is sometimes methylated, not always, based on which there is a difference in the naming pattern of the cap that we will see. So here you can see that this is the primary transcript that is produced, and even before finalizing the primary transcript or transcription process, the 5' cap is added. So if there is a free end of the primary transcript is available, immediately the capping system will attach a cap at the 5' end of the primary transcript even before the completion of the transcription. So that process includes, here we have the 5' or 5' end with the triphosphate. So there is a phosphohydrolase enzyme that is used and pyrophosphate is released. So which will leave or which will remove 2 phosphates from one end. Then there is a guanyl transferase enzyme which is used to add a guanyl residue at one end. That is the guanyl residue which is added here. Then adomet, that is a guanyl 7-methyl transferase enzyme will add CH3 group, or this methyl group is added at the end or 7th position of the guanine residue that is added, and then there are additional methylations which is done at these 2 positions. So during the process of 5' capping, we can see that the phosphohydrolase enzyme will remove the pyrophosphate, or 2 phosphates will be removed from the end of or 5' end or 5' end. Then a guanine residue with a GTP is added here using 5' connection. Then methyl group on the guanine residue, this residue is attached using the guanine 7-methyl transferase. Then 2-O-methyl transferase or additional methyl transferase enzymes will methylate these subsequent residues. So this is the overall process of 5' capping. Is it clear? And there is a different naming patterns. For example, cap 1 methyl cap type 1 means it is attached only with the 7-methyl guanosine at the end, and these 2 positions were not methylated. Cap 2 and cap 0. The first one is cap 0, then cap 1 and cap 2. Cap 2 means all the 3 methylation process is done. And in case of cap 1, the 7-methyl guanosine and the first position is methylated. In case of cap 2, 7-methyl guanosine, then first position and second position, all the 3 are methylated in case of cap 2. So there is 3 different types of methyl caps. There is cap 0, cap 1 and cap 2. So that means these 2 were not always expected. That is that's why it is marked as sometimes methylated. So if it is methylated, then it is cap 1, and if this 2 is methylated, then it is designated as a cap 2. And if these 2 were not present and only 7-methyl guanosine is attached at the 5' end, then it is known as a cap 0. So there are different types of methyl caps that is available. And this methyl cap, especially it is having some significant roles. It is said to give protection to the mRNA. Usually mRNA is short-lived, and without such protection the mRNA may be immediately liable to lysis and or degradation, but it adds some amount of protection, or it increases the lifespan of the mRNA. That's one role. And another role is that it is used as the starting point of a translation. So these eukaryotic mRNAs that require the 5' or 5' methyl cap for its transcription initiation. So these two are some of the significant roles of the 5' cap. Okay. So I think it is the discussion about the cap is now over. Now we will come to different types of introns. The different types of introns. There are different types of introns which needs processing. So the intron processing or intron removal, which is also known as splicing, and that splicing is having various mechanisms of splicing, and that splicing mechanism is actually based on the type of the intron that is present in the mRNA. So there are basically group 1 introns, group 2 introns, and there are some other splicing based on spliceosomal introns. And we will see it in detail. There are group 1 introns, group 2 introns, and spliceosomal introns, which requires a complex of proteins and RNA, that is a spliceosome, and that is required for the splicing of the spliceosomal introns. The other one, group 1 and group 2 introns, doesn't require the mediation of protein or RNA spliceosomal support for their removal. So group 1 introns and group 2 introns were actually self-splicing, whereas the spliceosomal introns require the support of the snRNPs and snRNAs for their removal. That's the basic difference between these two. And the spliceosomal introns maybe that is actually it is having about snRNPs and snRNAs. So the snRNPs means small nuclear ribonuclear proteins, and small nuclear RNAs, which may be designated as U1, U2, U3, U4 and U6, and about 50 different proteins. So all these constitute the spliceosome. And there we have two different types of spliceosome RNA ends, or that intron, the end sequences of the intron. That will be GU at the 5' end and AG at the 3' end. So there is one class of introns where the intron segments is having GU at 5' end and AG at 3' end. And another class is about U11, U12, U3 and U4 and U6. So that is about the second class of introns, which will work on AU and AC end regions. So end regions means there are introns and exons in the primary transcripts, and introns needs to be removed from the that intermediate position. So the intron ends, or one end of the or 5' end of the intron is having a GU or AU sequence, and another one at the 3' end of the intron maybe there is a AG or AC, and based on these end sequences we will have different set of snRNPs and some different set of proteins for splicing. So the spliceosomal introns were actually of two categories: the introns with GU and AG ends and AU and AC ends, which will require different set of snRNPs, snRNAs for their splicing and formation of spliceosome. So this is about different types of introns. Group 1 and group 2 introns were self-splicing, that doesn't require the support of snRNPs and snRNAs and additional different proteins. It is not required. Whereas the spliceosomal introns, which require the snRNPs and snRNAs, were of two types with two different end sequences. So there is either GU and AG end sequences, which will use one set of snRNPs and snRNAs, and another one that is a AU and AC ends of the introns, which will use another class of SNRNPs and SNRNAs, or another configuration of the spliceosome. And that spliceosome will help, or it will aid in the removal of that intron from the RNA. So this is about different types of the introns. Is it clear? Okay. Now there is another fourth class of introns that is known as RNA intron, tRNA introns, that is found in certain tRNAs, and it requires ATP and an endonuclease additionally for its removal. And the splicing endonuclease cleaves the phosphodiester bond at both ends of the intron. So there is an endonuclease and ATP, energy of ATP and endonuclease is required for the class 3 or fourth class of intron removal. And two exons are joined together by a mechanism similar to the DNA ligase reaction. So that is a rare class of introns. But basically when we talk about splicing, we talk about the three items initially. That is a group 1 and group 3 introns and the spliceosomal introns. But there is also, it is said, there is a report that there is a fourth class of introns which require energy utilization or energy expenditure from the ATP, and also the role of some endonuclease for the removal of the introns, and finally joining of the segments or the exon units using the DNA ligase reaction. So it is something, all these type of exons were joined together by ligase reaction. So this is a fourth class of intron which is reported. So when we talk about the spliceosome or the intron types, we have group 1, group 2 and spliceosomal, and then there is a fourth category of tRNA introns which require or which demands the use of ATP and endonuclease. So this is all about the different types of intron. Now when we come to the actual splicing process, we need to understand the transesterification reaction. I think you already know that. So in transesterification reaction, we have the phosphate and OH that is interacting together. Then finally an NH2 molecule is released in the transesterification reaction. So here we have a guanosine. So this is the backbone, 5' and 3' between two, or sugar phosphate backbone is shown here. This is the sugar of one nucleotide. This is the second nucleotide sugar. So there is a phosphodiester bond between these two sugar molecules. So this is a phosphodiester backbone or phosphodiester bond between the two nucleotides. An incoming nucleotide, in case of RNA, the incoming nucleotide is always having two OH groups because it is a ribose sugar, and this OH group will have a nucleophilic attack on the phosphate group, and that results in shifting of this, because actually this phosphate is joined to the 3' OH group, right? In this sugar molecule here, actually there was an OH group which was present, and this OH group is joined with the phosphate by eliminating a water molecule. This phosphodiester is formed here. Now if you can provide another OH group instead of this one, original one, then the bond will be shifted to this one. Just like somebody shaking a hand with you are making a what is called Manishi Changala, or a human chain, in which everybody is holding their hands to the nearby persons, and if a new person comes in and gives you a shake hand, what happens? Certainly you will break the chain and you will give the shake hand to the incoming person. So in effect the chain is gone. So only thing that required is that for the shake hand between the phosphate and OH, what you require is the 3' OH group and 5' phosphate group. So that's what actually forms the phosphodiester bond between the two sugar molecules. But when an incoming person gives a shake hand in the form of a 3' OH group to the phosphodiester bond, the phosphodiester bond will be shifted to the concerned incoming nucleotide. So that results in shifting of the phosphodiester bond to the incoming guanosine residue, and that results in the breakage of the chain. So that's what happens here. Okay. So the OH group will be here and the phosphodiester bond will be shifted to the incoming residue. Is it clear? Okay. Now we come to the splicing process of the group 1 and group 2 introns. So if you understand the basic concept of the previously mentioned transesterification reaction and the transfer of this phosphodiester bond to the incoming residue or incoming free OH group that is provided, then you can come to the example of the group 1 introns. So in group 1 introns, this is the exon 1 and exon 2 which is shown, and this yellow portion is the intron. As I mentioned, the introns will have some specific end sequences, and in case of splices over introns, but in this case it is not like that because end sequence is not relevant. Usually it is self-splicing, so it won't require the support of the spliceosomes. So here we have the intron sequences. So this is the 5' end of the intron. This is the 3' end of the intron, because see, this is the 5' or 5' end of the first exon, and this U represents the 3' end of the first exon. So when we come to the intron, the A is the 5' end of the intron and G is the 3' end of the intron. And in the case of third exon, U is the 5' end, and this is the last residue which is present at this end will be the 3' end. Okay. So in the intron, there will be a 5' residue with a phosphate, that is a A. In this case, it is A. An incoming guanosine residue with a free 3' OH group will have a nucleophilic attack on this one. Okay. So the 3' OH of the guanosine acts as a nucleophile and attacking the phosphate group of the 5' splice site, resulting in what? A free OH group of the first exon at 3' position, and this end of the exon is now free. Intron is now free, joined with the incoming guanosine. Now what happens? Here we have another OH group which is newly created at the 3' or 3' end of the first exon, which will perform another nucleophilic attack on the 3' end of the intron. So this OH will form a bond with this U, releasing this G. So the net result is that the intron sequences were spliced out and the exons were joined together by self-splicing, because what we require is only a guanosine residue, no other enzymes or RNAs or snRNPs. All these things were not required in the splicing of the group 1 introns. The only requirement is a nucleophilic attack by an incoming guanosine residue. Okay, is it clear? Now we come to the group 2 introns. In case of group 2 introns, take the example here. Here, in the case of group 2 introns, we don't have an incoming guanosine, or an external supply of a guanosine with the free OH group is not present in the case of a group 2 introns. But instead, it uses an internal region, internal portion of the concerned intron with an OH group. RNA means in case of a nucleotide that is used in the case of RNA, that is a deoxyribose, right? Alle? Is it deoxyribose? Ano? Ribose ano? Deoxyribose ano ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത് RNA? Ribose ആണ്, yes. അപ്പോൾ റൈബോസിൽ എത്ര OH ഉണ്ട്? എത്ര ഫ്രീ OH ഉണ്ട്? രണ്ടെണ്ണം ഉണ്ട് അല്ലേ? What is the difference between the DNA and RNA? DNA is having only 3' or 3' OH, whereas the second OH is removed in the case of RNA or the ribose. Deoxyribose remove ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നു. Ribose we have the 2' OH which is present, and since RNA uses ribose, the 2' OH is already present in the RNA, right? So all the ribose sugars that is used in the case of RNA is having the 2' OH. അതേസമയത്ത് 3' ഫ്രീ ആണോ? അല്ല. ബിക്കോസ് ഒരു RNA സ്റ്റാൻഡിലുള്ള എല്ലാ 3' OH എന്തിനു ഉപയോഗിച്ചു? ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് യൂസ്ഡ് ഫോർ ദ ഫോർമേഷൻ ഓഫ് എ ഷുഗർ ഫോസ്ഫേറ്റ് ബാക്ക് ബോൺ. അല്ലേ? ഫോസ്ഫോഡൈസ്റ്റർ ബാക്ക് ബോണിന് വേണ്ടത് ഉപയോഗിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു. സോ ദിസ് RNA chain, it is actually formed, or this C and P, this P is connected with the phosphate and or 5' phosphate and 3' OH. So there is no 3' OH free in the RNA, whereas all the 2' OH is free in the RNA molecule. അത് എയിൽ മാത്രമല്ല, ഇവിടെ എയിലുണ്ട്, സിയിലുണ്ട്, എയിലുണ്ട്. സോ എവറി ന്യൂക്ലിയോടൈഡ് റെസിഡ്യൂ in the RNA is having a 2' OH group which is free. So when we discuss the structure of the RNA, I mentioned that RNA is short-lived and it is easy to degrade because of some structural peculiarities, including the use of the ribose sugar, which will result in rapid degradation of the RNA by nucleophilic attack between the 2' OH and the subsequent nearby phosphates, so that it will form cyclic nucleotides. Then it will be released, or the continuous strand of the RNA will be easily broken. That's why RNA is more unstable than the DNA molecules. ഇത് നമ്മളത് പറഞ്ഞതാണ്. So in case of RNA molecule, we have the ribose sugar with 2' OH, and that 2' OH is always present in all the nucleotide residues which is used in the case of RNA. So what we require in case of group 2 splicing is that we require a free OH group which is provided by the 2' OH of an internal residue. Here we have an A in the intron with a free OH group. So this OH group will perform the nucleophilic attack instead of the guanosine that is used in case of a group 1 intron. Okay, so in the case of group 1 introns, we have an incoming nucleotide with a free 3' or 3' OH group which is performing the nucleophilic attack, and then subsequent steps were same. But in group 2 introns, that incoming nucleotide is not there, but instead that role of the free OH group, 3' OH group is actually performed by an internal residue of or adenine residue of the intron with a free 2' OH, which will perform the nucleophilic attack on this point, and now it will form a lariate or ring-like structure here, and the initial exon or first exon will be now with a free 3' OH group. Now the steps were same as in the case of the group 1 intron. It will perform another nucleophilic attack on the 3' or 3' end of the intron. Then the strands will be joined, or exon strands will be joined together, and the intron will be released from the primary transcript. So this is how the group 2 introns work. ഇപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ വ്യത്യാസമൊക്കെ ഉള്ളൂ. ഗ്രൂപ്പ് 1ഉം ഗ്രൂപ്പ് 2 ആയിട്ട് ഒരേ ഒരു വ്യത്യാസമുള്ളൂ. So that is in group 1 intron, incoming guanosine and its free OH group is used for nucleophilic attack. Whereas in group 2 intron, there is no incoming guanosine. Instead, an internal nucleotide with it's a free 2' OH with this nucleophilic attack will be used for removing the or initiating the splicing process and removal of the introns. So that's the difference. Is it clear? Okay. So this is another representation of the same. So, okay. So this is the RNA pairing interactions in the formation of a spliceosome complex, and I think we will discuss it later in the next session. Is it okay? The spliceosome mediated splicing that can be discussed in the next session. Any doubts? Hello? ഒന്നുമില്ല. So then we'll discuss it in the next session. Okay.